Hey there, Space Free here. If this space is so dead, then how am I in it? The Dead Space franchise was once the peak of gaming, up there with Master Chief and Doom Guy for having the top 10 coolest video game helmets of all time, the face of horror games, multiple game awards, sick freaking graphic t-shirts. Dead Space had it all, but then it came to a close one day when perhaps one of the greatest video game fumbles of all time, the release of Dead Space 3, a game that would go on to become a core example what you don't want to do for a sequel, a game that would lead to the closure of the studio that made the games, and outside of the Dead Space 1 remake would lead to the death of the franchise completely. Which is honestly a tragedy, as most of the problems with Dead Space 3 weren't because of the devs, but because of the publisher EA. But what was wrong with Dead Space 3? Is it really a bad game? And why am I asking so many questions? Well, let's start at the beginning. Dead Space 1. Oh, and I will be using the remake for this comparison because I'm biased gaming. I haven't played that other one in like years, so Dead Space 1 started it all. It set up what people expected from following games. Set on the Ishimura spaceship, Isaac Clarke, aka that guy with the helmet, is sent with a small team to repair a few systems inside and meet up with his hot babe. But when we get to the ship, it's pretty clear something's wrong, and the game is pretty quick to drop you in the thick of it pretty fast. The ship itself is dark, it's cramped, and there's generally a feeling of defenselessness the whole time. Isaac's not a soldier, he's just some dude. He moves slow, most of his weapons are just engineering tools like stasis or kinesis, and he just improvises ways to hold back enemies throughout the entire game. The necromorphs, which are these little flesh abomination guys, like yo mama, made from the reanimated corpses of the crew, whilst most of the rest of the crew have gone completely insane. The whole game just has this uneasy atmosphere as Isaac will hear whisperings constantly. The ship is completely isolated with no way off, and the internal nighttime of space keeps the oppressive atmosphere the whole time. Not to mention, enemies will give you literal panic attacks as they close in around you and there's no way to push through them. The only brief respites you ever get are the shops and upgrade stations before you're plunged into another pitch black room filled with little grimblies. The original Dead Space is Silent Hill levels of iconic for horror, and it sold fairly well, so it got a sequel which is debatably even better than the first game, adding some action elements in a similar way to the Alien franchise. I mean, the Dead Space series is actually incredibly similar to the Alien movies. An amazing horror piece, a sequel which is better than the original and became more action oriented, and finally a third one which is just straight booty cheeks, is straight ass. I'm talking about Dead Space 3 now. After the release of Dead Space 2, EA saw the sales being similar to the first game despite the bigger budget, and they were not happy. They wanted more doubloons, so they tightened their claws, leaned close and said, make me money or you're done, kid. Dead Space 3 had to sell 5 million copies or they were going to shut the whole thing down, which is cool and all, but remember this was like 2013 and gaming was still a nerd thing. Like, you'd be bullied for this still, unlike today where it's like funny Fortnite Twitch screamers. So the sales were going to be a lot harder. This massive goal is one of the main things that caused Dead Space 3 to end up as such a weird, jumbled up game, because they did one thing you should never do when you have a cool, freaking sick horror series: generalize. They saw the action elements from 2 and went, sure, whatever, make that the whole game. And so Dead Space 3 just became an action shooter. It's pretty clear even from the get-go now, when you start up the game, the tone is so much more different. One of the main selling points of 3 was in fact that it was set on an ice planet, as well as being advertised as a co-op game. 2 super unique things, considering this was meant to be a horror game, and had things that, believe it or not, were not in the other 2 games, which were mostly set in the infinite void of space. Dead Space 3 is made up of 3 sections, really. You've got the prologue, which is both you playing as a couple of army soldiers a little while back on the ice planet. I don't remember its name, leave me alone, shut the f. And we can identify some problems right here. These enemy designs suck dookie, dude. I mean, this is not a necromorph, this is some dude with axes. I mean, he looks cool, but that's just a dude. That's just, they're all just dudes. The whole segment is just us and our buddy who randomly disappears in cutscenes collecting this cool thing, then meeting this guy right here. Oh, well, alright. Then jump comes to modern Dead Space time, and now we get a very depressed, alcoholic, divorced dad, Isaac Clarke, who quickly gets decked in his own apartment by this dude with some sick-ass armor. And this is John Carver. Like I said earlier, this game's main selling point had become the co-op play, which I must admit is pretty good. I mean, what's better than a peak game with a good buddy? And in my opinion, Carver looks cooler than Isaac like 90% of the time, but hey, our buddy Carver, he's a weird guy, and he basically serves as Isaac's buddy cop counterpart for the whole game, as they kind of hate each other, but as it goes on, they hate each other slightly less, as well as Harvey having a lot of space PTSD. He's a pretty good character, even if he's just relentlessly on Isaac's back for 90% of the game for no reason, telling him he sucks and that he better not blow this, and hey, look at my sick ass suit, dude. Despite the fact Isaac's done this thing 2 times before with no help, which is already 2 times more than Carver, but hey, he still insults him and gives him the Shane speech in almost every cutscene. Now, another interesting thing with Carver is if you're playing him, like I was for most of the game, he has this magic ability of making the cutscene transitions as comedically awful as possible. I mean, I don't mind it because when I'm playing Carver, it just makes me laugh how unsmooth the transitions were. Sorry, player 2's around the world though. Looks like being the little brother once again was the inferior move. At least if you play as player 2 here, you get the cooler armor. Anyway, I've gone ahead of myself. Why is John Carver breaking into alcoholic Clark's dingy space apartment? Well, him and this other guy, whose name I forgot, I think it's Norton, are here to rescue Isaac from a group of cultists called the Unitologists, which, not to get into the lore or anything, it's a religion in the Dead Space world that worship these things called the markers that make the necromorphs, as well as drive people insane. Sick ass schizo gaming visions. Well, for Dead Space 3, they've pretty much wiped out the government and they're trying to kill Isaac because he's destroyed 2 markers previously. Also, a fun fact about this Norton guy, he spends half the game straight up cooking Isaac, which I think is pretty hilarious, as not only does he spend half the game grumpy and depressed, he has to watch as his love interest from the second game is just with another guy in this weird love triangle that's just kind of comedic instead of like a serious plot point. A lot of people really hate it, but I think it's great because it's kind of like a dumb Spanish soap opera level of just cheesiness. He says she went missing from trying to help them destroy the markers. Now they need his help to find her from her last known location. So the first mission starts us off in kind of a weird spot, as unlike in the first 2 games where we have to fight necromorphs, the first enemies of Dead Space 3 are cultists with guns, which is really weird tonally, as there's already not really much horror factor. Instead, it feels more like a gritty action movie or something. The environments are these dirty city streets and the cultists just use regular guns, and there's even a very simple cover mechanic, making this kind of like Gears of War, except the gunplay just kind of sucks. For human combat, it does not hit. Like, this is just not satisfying at all. How can I play this? Their limbs don't even fly off. But the one upside is, just as Carver, Isaac, and Cooker make it out of Isaac's apartment, we get blessed with the greatest cutscene of all gaming history. That's pure Kino. They attempt to extract but get ambushed by basically the major member of the Unitology cult. He kills some random guy and blows up a building restricting the marker that was on the planet, and all of a sudden we gotta get out of Dodge. The following sequence is Carver and Isaac trying to escape the colony whilst fighting off both colonists and necromorphs until this epic freaking train sequence featuring many awesome ladder climbing animations. They escape the colony, and this brings us to the next section of the game, where the Dead Space 3 make their way to where Ellie, the love interest, was last seen, a planet that was believed to be the marker homeworld. Cool ice one from earlier, and in orbit they find a graveyard of shipwrecks. What wrecked them, you ask? All of these mines, of course. The goal is to blow up. Ship gets blown up, Isaac gets a pretty ugly new suit, and now this next segment of the game is set in the atmosphere above the planet, primarily set in the old shipwrecks, with them trying to find a working ship as well as get to Ellie and her crew. The segments are a lot more in line with the original Deep Space vision. The ships are more moody, and we only fight necromorphs again, but as we enter the first shipwreck after all the mines blew apart the old one, we can find this, the crafting bench, probably the most controversial part of all this game. It's like Dead Space 3's primary mechanic. You can craft weapons, upgrade weapons, as well as modify them with things like stat chips and new secondary firing types. I mean, there is a lot to it. There's also a lot of these preset guns you can make, which are pretty interesting, but can cost a metric ton of materials, which you will have to do many replays for. That is, unless you spend money. See, this bench mechanic is tied to something a little naughtier, a little sneakier: microtransactions. In a story game, no less, the greatest sin of man. See, you can get these resources from looting as well as killing enemies, but the main way you can get these resources is this little bot boy right here that you can pick up, and you can send him out to gather resources for you. And after a while, he'll return to a bench for you to collect all the goodies he picked up. But the problem is, you can pay to make the bot not only collect loot faster, but there's also a DLC to make it get more resources per run. That's right, Dead Space 3 is actually pay to win. It's over. It's so over. Now, not only can you use these resources to make and modify guns, but you can use them to upgrade things like health and armor. But probably the worst of all is you can now, instead of buying, just craft things like health packs and ammo, which may sound frickin' sweet, Lowish, but actually makes the game way less tense because it's way easier to get these resources than it was to get credits in the previous games. And that links us to another issue with the ammo system, as originally every gun had its own unique form of ammo, but instead now we have universal ammo, which, whilst it's necessary because there is a lot of gun variations, like each gun has its own barrel that can change what the gun does, and times that by the amount of gun cores and everything, it's going to be a lot fast. You probably have like 1 bullet per gun per playthrough. It'd be nuts. But the problem is that now every ammo piece you find is the right one. It just gets rid of that resource management building of tension of running out on your main gun, so you have to use the Ripper or something, some ad. It also just feels like ammo and health packs in general are way more abundant because this game is so much more combat focused this time around. The game just gives you more stuff simply because you need it. How are you going to beat the game when every room is full of enemies and you never have enough ammo? It's just one of those things. Since they went for action, it's going to lose that horror goodness as you play. I mean, don't get me wrong, Dead Space 3 has its moments. I think they're still a handful of times, me and my co-op partner were genuinely scared. So don't completely write off the horror aspects of 3. Eventually the two of us will reach a power generator and we have to restart the engine. And here we can see a really cool feature where the game actually changes objectives if you're in co-op or not. So both players have to do something to complete a task instead of just Isaac doing it all himself like in single player. It's a pretty good change, a bit more engaging, a bit more fun. Gives you room for shenanigans like going AFK in a doorway, forcing your co-op partner to stand there waiting for you to come back progress as they stare into the abyss. It feels a lot more polished than some parts of the co-op, but then again, I love these transitions, so I don't mind. After reactivating the generators, Isaac meets up with Ellie and watches as he gets full on 100% power cut. We get to meet Ellie's crew. I don't remember their names, they don't really do much, and frankly, you'll forget them immediately after they die throughout the game, so it's not a big deal. Oh, and Carver in the scene, he appears looking away, and then when they pan back, he's gone. It's pretty painfully clear he just got added in post after the fact, but in my opinion, that just adds to the charm. It makes it funnier to me. I honestly love that. If anything, it makes it even better. But the plus side is the co-op adds extra lines of dialogue and interactions between Carver and Isaac that you would miss out on if you didn't play co-op, which quite frankly Carver needs, because in single player he doesn't really get enough moments at all. Now that Isaac has found his hot babe, she tells him about some other schizo writings that Admiral the ship wrote down that have the secrets we need, and after a little bit of light marker psychosis, we learn about some kind of machine that can control the markers, and the group decide to head to the funny snow planet on the box art to solve the mystery. But sadly, this is probably Isaac's only marker moment in the game. It's mostly Carver that gets messed with throughout the game. Another cool thing you'd miss in single player, but we can get to that later. As Carver and Isaac now, they find this little kiosk ship which lets them pick from this semi-open world of shipwrecks, 2 of which are main quests, 1 is an optional, and the 4th is perhaps the best mission type in the game, the co-op missions. These require 2 players, which sucks because they're easily the best part of the game, and a majority of people will miss out on them because who's going to convince their friend to play this, you know what I mean? Who's buying Dead Space 3? These missions are centered around Carver and his past. Much like Isaac in Dead Space 2, he's going to see some weird stuff, all of which the Isaac player won't see, so you're going to sound like a psych ward patient the whole time. But frankly, that's awesome. More games need to do that. Problem is, if you aren't in co-op, you're going to miss these sick-ass Carver moments, but you also won't get any marker moments in general, which are like the best part of these games. Dead Space 2 was the best game, and it had many dementia-ridden scenes, which kind of blows. They're my favorite part of these games, but there's barely any in this one. Because as we know, there's bugs under my skin, there's bugs under my skin, there's bugs under my... Anyway, for the rest of this segment, the mystery gang travel from ship to ship, trying to find a ship in order to get down to the planet. There's also an optional mission for this segment, which includes decoding a distress call, kind of boring, but also hunting down some guy that's booby-trapped his ship, will taunt you over comms, only for him to have already killed himself when you find him, and then try and blow up the ship. It's actually my personal favorite side mission in the whole game, not including the co-op ones. Anyway, skip ahead a bit. The group find an old ship they can use to go down to the planet, but it needs refueling and recalibrating. But it's a horror game, so everything that can go wrong does go wrong. We managed to stop the place melting down and the ship ramming into an unopened shuttle door, and then it's just a case of using a remote piloting beacon we made earlier in order to send it down to the shuttle station so the whole gang can get in and travel to the Dead Space 3 planet. How long did it take us to get this point on the box art, you might ask? Half the game. But I mean, to be fair, the space segments, they're pretty good. It's like a nice final farewell to the tight and dark corridors of the original 2 games versus the more open snowy areas and wider bunkers we're going to see in a second. I would like to comment though, Carver has not spoken in a weirdly long time at this point in the game. Almost like the space section was meant to be an Isaac thing. They mount up into the ship and get ready to fly down, and if you're playing Carver, you get this sick freaking shooting segment. Also, I have no idea who this guy is. He spawns in from nowhere like a skinwalker, which is why I'm kind of glad his face gets turned into a paste like a minute in. Also, the ship rips apart, and now the real Dead Space 3 can begin. The snow segments are probably the most iconic part of this game because of the visuals. They're pretty cool. How many horror games are set in snow places? Club Penguin fishing game is like the only one I can think of. And probably the best part about this segment is now not only do those forgettable ass characters from earlier not talk to us anymore, but the game basically becomes a buddy cop movie between Isaac and Carver. And it feels like there's a lot more dialogue between them in this segment than there was previously, pretty much because they have to carry most of the narrative between them as they look for the rest of the crew, mostly consisting of Carver calling Isaac a beta male and making memes where he's the Chad and Isaac is the soldier. A masterpiece, truly a masterpiece. But the fun doesn't stop there, because up until the duo find new suits, they need to manage their body temperature by standing near fires, which is kind of annoying. It helps create that panic, especially when we tried getting into this bunker, realized it wouldn't open, got lost looking for where to go, only for at the very last second to find out where we needed to be, with a lot of screaming included as we thought we were about to die and lose all that progress. But guess who was also in that building? The fat guy from earlier, who ends up freezing to death immediately after dumping some lore about how they literally took all the thermal suits and left him to die there. I guess ratio, little bro. I'm glad he was in the game to speak to us once, talk over a radio on a side mission, then die. Probably my favorite middle-aged character. Moving past that, we can find these weird scrawny looking necromorphs, which look more like that weird alien hybrid from that terrible Alien 4 movie. I mean, the lore behind them is pretty cool, eating necromorph meat, leading to them becoming that, but in gameplay, I just like ragdolling them around. The two find some thermal suits of their own, so we don't have to manage the temperature anymore, thank God, and they head up to find the rest of the team. They nearly fall off a truck or something, get jumped by this scary looking spider boss. They fend it off. Carver says how much he hates Isaac and his girlfriend again. I'm getting strong incel energy coming from Carver, I'm not gonna lie. They find the team. Cookman and Isaac have a very forced argument. Yeah, he's not written very well. He kind of just like switches on a dime now, but they find out that the machine that controls the markers is on the other side of the facility, so they're gonna skedaddle on over. But wait, more human enemies, because that cult guy did in fact follow us here, which means more unsatisfying gunplay. But I wonder how he followed us here. How did he know? Anyway, I'm gonna skim some more details. Basically, they digging in me. We get bored by a mega necromorph that was frozen by warming him up and playing with its nerve clusters. That sounds so weird. Which allows us to obtain a better signal to the facility spot we need. I'm sure it won't have consequences later in the game. But as the two are getting lifted back out of the belly of the beast, guess who's there? Well, if it isn't John Cook. And what's this? He's going to leave us in the cage? What a good guy. I mean, it's a good thing the crank needed to let us out is literally right next to us. We make our way outside to... Oh, not only did he leave us in there, but he made a deal with Danik, the villain, to kill us if he let the rest of the team go. But he ain't doing that shit. So Cook Boy gets ready to die alongside us until, oh yeah, I left the oven on. There's a boss fight where we have to kill this thing. Yeah, I know, right? Having to shoot the like yellow sacks like pretty much every other Dead Space boss until he bores us. We swim inside for a bit and then we kill it, so we get spat back out.
Was that kind of sexy? Am I crazy? Was that kind of hot?
You got problems, Carver. Well, I just saved your life. Isaac pops in, and frankly, I just need you to watch this cutscene because this is my favorite part of the whole game. It's pure keynote. I am honestly so glad I recorded that part. Now, what's left for us, you may ask? Well, Isaac and Carver meet up with Ellie and this other person, I forgot her name. Don't worry, she doesn't matter either. Carver when Isaac have girlfriend versus Carver when he kill innocent woman. They scale up a mountainside and have a really weird and buggy climbing segment, as well as finally kill that spider by ripping him apart, and finally we make it to the actual part of the facility we need. So now we're in the final stage of the game. Oh, and if you haven't noticed yet, none of this is really that scary. I've been skipping over stuff, but like that isn't much terror factor here. It's all kind of action, and the main reason I think this is one, a snow planet is very bright because everything's white, so it's not going to be very moody. I mean, don't get me wrong, it works for like The Thing, but not Dead Space. It's too open. I feel too free. Not to mention all the interiors in the game are copy and pasted as hell, especially in the side missions, to the point when rewatching my footage, I was confused what point of the game I was at. But the main problem is, it's because Dead Space 3 is just a power fantasy game. If you have an even decent setup, you can fodderize most of the enemies in the game, and if you're in co-op, wrap it up, dude. It's over. They don't stand a chance. The combat makes you feel too strong. Even late game enemies like the alien necromorphs, they'll get destroyed by my baller ass gun. And the fact that all ammo works for it means it's just endlessly tearing through these guys. But anyway, let's wrap this up real quick. The facility has these labs with someone called Rosetta, but we need to collect the missing pieces in order to reassemble her dead body to unlock the secrets in her brain. So you have to go through the whole facility, ignore the gnome, collecting them until you can finally assemble them all and learn the truth that the machine to control the markers isn't controlling them, but freezing the final stage of marker progression, aka the literal moon. The moon is made of thousands and thousands of dead aliens, and the machines are stopping it from coming back alive. So if it gets turned off, it's all over. Oh, but hey, Danik's here and he heard that whole thing and now he's taking the key. How epic is that? How awesome is that? They're about to execute us, but once again, they are proven to be the worst cult group of all time. We initiate the sterilization protocol that uses this funny orange gas to literally just unexist you. You become nothing. It rocks. I do escape the lab, but Ellie gets left behind. Isaac's kind of upset, but don't worry. Carver and his low poly ears give Isaac a pep talk.
Isaac, your girlfriend's dead. No.
They escape the gas flooding the facility and begin chasing Danik, fighting through his men and heading down into the depths of the planet where the machine is located. Carver tries to stop Isaac's Sigma male crash out TikTok moment. That sucks. Why did I write that? And weirdly enough, Carver actually opens up to Isaac once they enter the old alien civilization the machine's contained in. He starts to have doubts that they can actually get this thing done, and he wants to make sure that after everything he's done so far, that it all counts. He also tells us that he harbors guilt about his family life, alienating his son and abandoning them, which is what all of the co-op missions cover for Carver. He actually becomes somewhat well written and human in his last hour of gameplay, and he even says he's sorry Ellie died instead of just saying, dude, I told you so, dude, I hate women, dude. This is the part of Carver that's actually interesting, and I wish we got more of this dynamic in the main game, as most of the game he's just a generic angry soldier dude. The beginnings of the alien city though are mostly us fighting the unitologist forces and blowing up their barricades until we catch up to Danik and steal back the codex, but then the two fall off a cliff into the lower levels. And now this segment, I'm gonna be so real, I despise it. I think it's so much longer than it needs to be. All the environments look the exact same. You travel through the alien city and there's slightly different necromorphs here that look kind of cool, but on biased gaming, I hate it. It's boring, we skipping it. There's only like 1 or 2 cool puzzles and the rest is like constant combat in like the most boring way. Like my brain was turning to mush when I was playing this part. But what's this? Danik has captured Ellie, despite us literally seeing her die in a very, very obvious way. How did she escape?
I escaped the delivery too. They caught me.
Yeah, sure. Seems legit, whatever, I don't care. Eventually we make it to the machine where Danik is getting ready to use the MacGuffin from earlier to turn it off and start the convergence. And he wants to trade Ellie for the key, which is naturally a stupid idea, but Carver does a complete character 180 and gives Danik the key so Elliot can have his girlfriend for precisely 2 minutes until the literal moon becomes a necromorph and tries to kill them. Oh, and Danik gets... Oh wait, I've run out of good yes king mode. And now Isaac and Carver have to fight a literal fucking moon to the death in order to reach the machine and stop convergence taking place and turning every single moon into one of these. We throw big rocks at it, which is basically most of that boss fight. Ellie leaves so she doesn't die, and then Carver and Isaac have to face the end.
Die here? No. But Earth gets it tomorrow.
Oh yeah, and Isaac dies too, I guess. And that's how Dead Space 3 ends, with him falling to his death, looking at his girlfriend that was straight up cooking him for half the game. Now there is a DLC as well that takes place immediately after this, and it covers how Isaac and Carver tried to escape planet after they somehow survived falling from orbit. I don't know how. It's a lot more like the previous 2 games in terms of tone. It covers what the story writers wanted to originally cover, which was the Rebel Moon plotline and them attacking Earth. And it's mostly them looking for parts to fix the ship to leave on, us fighting a subset of cultists, and it actually has a lot more dementia hallucinations for both characters, which is pretty sweet because they're the best part of these games. Anyway, the DLC ends with the rest of the Rebel Moons finding Earth and beating them to it. Surprise, they only stopped one moon, and that's it. This was meant to lead into a Dead Space 4, which from an interview said would have been about fighting necromorphs on an apocalyptic Earth, even some non-linear missions about gathering scraps. You'd even play as Ellie, they said, but the game didn't sell well enough, so the franchise is dead. The franchise died. It's a shame because Dead Space 3 is like a pretty good game. I actually really enjoyed playing this game with my friend. I see it as more of a power fantasy action game with a few little scary moments, but it just ain't very Dead Space. You know, this could have been its own standalone thing if you removed all the names and stuff. Not to mention, it probably has the weakest writing of the 3 games. Like, who thinks Dead Space needs a rom-com-esque love triangle? Wait, no, I take it back because we wouldn't get this awesome ragdoll otherwise. The side characters are pretty weak as well. I mean, I love Carver. I love him. Danik's okay. He's kind of one note, but like in a fun way, especially with that stupid-ass ponytail. But you can't really beat my girl. I mean, with pretty much every game I've reviewed recently, it's a good game. It fails to live up to the hype of the previous one. Part of the reason Dead Space 3 destroyed itself was it was trying to become something it wasn't. It abandoned what the original 2 games were, try and become its own thing to generalize itself. But in doing this, you just lost what brought people to the games in the first place. But anyway, in conclusion, there's bugs under my skin, and I have one white one, so please.
I've abandoned my child! I've abandoned